Well, thank you. Yeah. So I am delighted to be here. I'm like thrilled. I'm excited, and it's mostly because you're here. If I was just here in a room by myself, it wouldn't be so exciting. To see so many of you choose to spend a few hours on a beautiful Saturday afternoon talking about this topic, it's very encouraging, very exciting to me. And I want to start by saying, actually, today is the Jewish Sabbath, and this morning in synagogues all around the world, when people come to pray, just like in most churches, there's reading from the scriptures. We read from the Torah every week in a synagogue, set in the prayers. I think just like reading from scriptures, like a lectionary. And we have a very systematic way of doing that, that in the beginning of the Jewish year, we read from Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, read a few paragraphs, chapters, stop, come back the next week, a few more chapters, and by the end of the Jewish year, we finish the book of Deuteronomy. So there's a certain section of the Torah for every week of the year. And every synagogue in the whole world is reading that section on that Sabbath. So today, what we read in the synagogue this morning comes from the book of Leviticus. And it's the part that talks about the Jubilee. And the Jubilee says that after 49 years, on the 50th year, everybody needs to be free to go back to that place where they came from, to that little patch of earth, that farm or that hillside or that valley or whatever that was, where after 50 years already, it might have been their parents or grandparents came from. And all the debts are released. Are you all familiar with this idea of the Jubilee? Yeah. Right? And it's like a reset. And when Robert's talking about justice as a way, to reach peace, or actually he proposed it a little different way, but it's almost inevitable that in society there's going to become inequities. Some people are going to lose what they had, but the vision in the Bible is there's this reset. And everything gets set right once every 50 years. And then inevitably it's going to kind of get imbalanced again. But after another 50 years, we set right again. And that is so clearly, I want to say it's not only what's in the Bible, it's God's plan, the Creator to put us here on this earth. That's the way we need to do things. And in this very same section of the Torah, God says, you are but sojourners with me. The land is mine. You are sojourning on my land. Don't have the illusion that you own it or it belongs to you. And also your tenancy on my land, this is the Creator of the universe speaking, depends on you living the way that I want you to live, in a just, right relationship with your neighbors. And if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to stay there. This is absolutely fundamental in the Bible, the Torah, Judaism's outlook on these things. It goes all the way back to the time of the very beginning of what we think of as our people's consciousness of being a people and having our own tradition, our own way of looking at things. So that's what we read in the synagogue this morning. Proclaim liberty to the land and to all the inhabitants thereof. And I just wanted to start with that. I mourn terribly how far off we are from that. So when we think about the 70th anniversary of the Nakba, the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War, and Israel's conquest of more of that land, we are just so far away from the basic and right understanding of how things need to be. That was one thing I wanted to just say. Another thing, just about me. 1 year ago today, I was in Tel Aviv. I have 2 adult children who grew up in Vancouver. My son's 28, my daughter's 26, and they grew up as my kids. And I've had a lot of relationship with Israel and with Palestine through the years. To be honest, I think I had a very strong relationship with Israel almost all that time. And Palestine only more recently began to kind of enter into my consciousness as something that I need to really take seriously and relate to. But just to say, my kids grew up. When they were little kids, they went to a Zionist youth camp that's on Gabriola Island. Some of you may know it. It's called Camp Miriam. When they were younger than that, just in their schools, they learned all about Israel and how glorious and wonderful it was. They went to a year of university at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Each of them did. And then when they became young adults, they each wanted to be there. I don't know if they're going to stay there the rest of their lives, but that's where they've been the last few years. I hadn't seen them myself for a few years, so I wanted to go and visit my kids. So actually May 8th, I did a kind of crazy thing. I flew into Cairo, and I left the airport and I hitchhiked. I wanted to hitchhike across the Sinai Desert to go to Taba, and then just walk into Israel by foot to Eilat, and then I would be there. And there was a whole bunch of stuff about activists not being allowed in through the airport. So I thought, okay, maybe this will work. And also, the Sinai Desert is actually in the Sinai. There's a lot of violence and a lot of conflict between the people who live there and the Egyptian military regime. So I was hitchhiking across the Sinai, and every maybe 10 or 20 miles there would be a military checkpoint. I got a ride with these great Bedouin in this really bouncy Jeep that was held together by paper clips or something. Every 10 or 20 miles we got to one of these military checkpoints, and all these Egyptian soldiers would check them out. They'd check me out because it wasn't too usual to see a person like me. Showed them my passport, they let me go. The next 10 or 20 miles, the same thing happened again. After I got about maybe 60 miles or 80 miles in there was an officer that just said, no, we can't let you go any farther. I'm just telling a story. I don't even know why I'm telling this. It's just a colorful story. So he told the Bedouin, they can go, but not me. Just a sideline here. I asked these Bedouin guys, where are you from? And they said they're from the Naqab. The Naqab, I think, is the southern part of Palestine, where Beersheba is there. In Hebrew it's called Negev, but in Arabic it's called Naqab. So these guys who picked me up hitchhiking are probably the grandchildren of Bedouin who lived somewhere around there, and they were expelled in 48, and now they live in the Sinai. Anyway, I was trying to get out of there. There's very little traffic. Nobody was picking me up. I told the officer, you got me here. Get me out of here, So the next car that came, he told that driver to take me back. Anyway, so I went all the way around the bottom of the Sinai, came back up. May 10th, I got into Israel, and today's May 12th. I was in Tel Aviv visiting my kids, but that tells you something about me. But another thing is, I didn't want to go all the way there and only visit my kids. So I found an amazing project called the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. And they organized for Jews from North America to go to Palestine for 10 days and really work in the field with Palestinian activists who are defending their homes, their communities, their villages, and really their lives. So and this was a really serious thing. They vetted people. They wanted to take 60 people. They said they had room for 60, and I applied for it, and I can speak Hebrew. I can manage a little bit of Arabic. I've lived there myself for 4 years. I know my way around. I've been involved in nonviolent activism for decades. So they accepted me to the program, and I was one of the oldest people. Almost all the people were in their 20s, which is a to me, it's like such a hopeful thing. So it's people my children's age, Jewish people my children's age, young people like my children who grew up very involved in Jewish life. Many of the people who were on this trip and the people who organized it and created it are the children of rabbis, Jewish studies professors in universities, executives in Jewish federations and Jewish organizations. They grew up steeped in it, like my kids did. I could even say they grew up fairly indoctrinated, totally oriented toward this relationship with Israel, and they feel a great commitment to changing what's going on there. So they created this organization. They ended up with over 120 people. There were about 140. They had so many people apply for it. They just decided to expand the program. So a year ago, probably tomorrow or the next day, I left Tel Aviv, where my kids live. I went to Jerusalem. This was all organized in a very secretive way so that the Israelis would not completely destroy it. This organization ran a program the year before, 2 years ago, and the Israeli army intervened and just stopped them from going where they wanted to go. They blocked them, and there's roadblocks and everywhere. You cannot move freely in the West Bank in more than a few miles at all. And they have these things they call flying roadblocks. They just drop a roadblock anywhere they want. Anyway, so we were all told, we didn't know where we were going. I didn't know where I was going for 10 days. They said, go to a certain street corner in Jerusalem and we'll have buses, and get on the bus. So we did that, and they took us into Bethlehem. And we stayed in Bethlehem overnight for 10 days. They divided the 120 of us into 5 different groups, and each group went to a different project in Palestine and really worked with the people, like shoulder to shoulder, for days. And it was a fabulous experience for me. I went to a small Bedouin village in the South Hebron Hills. Some of you may have heard of a village called Susia. Some indication of familiarity. So there are small Bedouin villages, just like encampments. I went to one called Al-Khair, which I'll just give you a little bit of history about this, and then I think I'll just stop talking and then hear more what you may want me to talk about. So Al-Khair, the history of Al-Khair, and this is indicative of many things and what's going on there. It's a village that didn't exist until about 1952, and the reason it came into existence is that when Israel took over, militarily invaded and took over the Negev or the Naqab, or that large desert area in the south, it had been inhabited for centuries, maybe thousands of years, by Bedouin, which means people who are herders. They have sheep and goats. They also farm. They have huge agriculture. This is a thing I did not know. Part of my education was that these nomads have no connection to the land. They just drift around with their camels or something. That's completely not true. They know exactly where they belong. They have exact boundaries and landmarks of their land and then the people next to them. And they did huge farming, thousands and thousands of acres of wheat and vegetables and all kinds of things that they live from. So anyway, in 1948, Israel forced tens of thousands of Bedouin off their land and out of that place, cleaned them out. There were some tens of thousands who managed to stay, and they and their descendants are there now, and they have Israeli citizenship. I could say, like Robert has Israeli citizenship, but they're used by the country or just almost discarded. But anyway, just back to this Al-Khair, where I went. So there was a group of Bedouin who were just kicked off their land, just expelled, and some of them were pushed into the Sinai. Some of them were pushed into what became Jordan, And then in 67, it became what we call the West Bank. So there, they had their herds, they had some animals, they had families, but they didn't have any homes. And they wandered, and they just stayed in various places, like in tents and stuff like that. From 48 until early 1950, they found a hillside that was for sale by the owner, just like people here own land. There was a wealthy landowner in a city there called Yatta. He was willing to sell this hillside. They bought this hillside, maybe something like 200 acres. And there's like, okay, we can go and live there. We'll reestablish our lives. About 1950 or 51. They built one stone house, and then they lived in tents. So from 1952 or something like that, they lived there. They could herd their animals, and there was like stuff to eat. They kind of reestablished their lives until 1967, when Israel invaded that place. Very soon after that, what happened is the Jewish National Fund, which is a tax-deductible Canadian charity, decided to plant some trees on a hilltop. So they planted a few hundred pine trees on a hilltop. Then they need to protect the trees. So they had a few Jewish people set up some homes nearby so they could protect the trees. And then they needed some military there to protect those people who were protecting the trees. So what I'm talking about now is in the early 1970s, that has turned into a settlement that's been there since the late 70s, early 80s. They have dozens and dozens of big houses with air conditioning, swimming pools, landscape gardens. They bring in water all the way from the Sea of Galilee, right? And they took the land of the people of Ocher, whose parents or grandparents' land was in the Negev that they got kicked out of. And for about the last 30 or 35 years, these Bedouin, and I feel weird calling them Bedouin, these people, these men, women, children, old people, have just trying to hold on to their land. They don't have electricity, they don't have running water, they don't have a paved road, they don't have a school. Their place where they live is not recognized, so they don't have any right to live there. The Israeli legal system doesn't grant them the right to live on this land that they bought. They have the deed to it, but they don't have the right to live there. They're Bedouin about 4 kilometers away in a village that's been there for a while. And they have a well with a pump. So they made a long hose to bring water to Ocher. So the people in Ocher very gratefully get water, like on Wednesday from 4 until 7. And they have big tanks, and they fill up the tanks, and they live on that. Except sometimes the settlers shoot the tanks to punch holes in them, and the water flows out. There's so many things I could tell you about this. Their houses they don't even have houses. They have this one house that existed before 67. So Israel grants that house can stay there. But every other structure, every tent, every latrine, every sheep corral, everything is under a condemnation order and can be demolished. And Israel has demolished their homes. And their homes are basically tents. Anyway, I was there for 5 days, ostensibly helping them build a playground for their children. And it felt like a very important thing to be there. And about 20 of us went back to this place 5 days in a row. We made wonderful relationships with the people. I'm still in touch with them. I could tell you how to find them on Facebook. You could connect with them. But that's just like one story. There's so much to say. Like I said, I'm not so organized. I chose not to be organized in speaking with you. I just feel like what flows, it'll work, So I'm having other thoughts I think I'll save just about for the end of my sharing with you from me. But that's just where I was this time last week. So I think I'd like to go back and hear what motivated you to come today. I'll just say a few things that are hopeful to me. In the last year or so, MPs have organized a Canada-Palestine Parliamentary Friendship Group that, if I got it correct, it has about 22, 23 members. Sadly, it's a very courageous thing for an MP to join a Canada-Palestine Parliamentary Friendship Group. They can expect retaliation, and they can expect it'll be harder to be reelected, So the fact that even happened is a very positive thing, and I think they need to be supported. That group recently led a tour of Palestine, which, they're Zionist lobby organizations take dozens of MPs to Israel and show them around, and they talk to Israeli politicians, and they create a very sympathetic picture of what's happening there for them. So this was a tour of Palestine for Canadian MPs. Again, if I got it right, 18 of them went. One of them, I think, is from the Duncan area, named Gord Johns. Yeah. And I talked with a friend of mine who lives in Courtenay, who said she spoke with him. She called him. She talked with him a few times. She kind of got him interested in this. And then he went on this trip, and it impacted him so much. This was just maybe 3 weeks ago. Elizabeth May went on this trip. 2 NDP MPs from the Vancouver area, Don Davies and Peter Julian, went on the trip. And I heard, you might remember just a very few years ago, within the Green Party in Canada, there was a resolution to support BDS that was supported by Green Party members voting by more than 90% or something, and Elizabeth May tried to suppress it. She tried to have it ruled out of order or stop it or something, and there was a big controversy within the Green Party just very few years ago. So I was surprised Elizabeth May went on this trip at all. And then when she came back, she recorded a statement with Alexandra Boudouris and another MP, maybe a 20-minute, 25-minute, like a little press conference thing. She spoke so clearly, so powerfully, exactly about what she saw and what's going on. It's rare to hear a politician speak that clearly about Palestine. So the trip must have impacted her. For me, this is a hopeful thing. I want you to know this. So it makes me feel less futile about trying to influence what Canada does. There are some organizations that I'll mention. The one that I'm a part of, called Independent Jewish Voices, works on this issue. We're a national organization with chapters in, 7, 8, or 9 cities across Canada, including in Victoria and Vancouver. I don't want to leave anybody out, but of course the United Church has a group within it that's very active called UNJPI, United Network for Justice and Peace in Palestine and Israel. Mennonite Church is very active. There's a group within the Anglican Church, it's called Sabil, that's really inspired by an Anglican priest who's a Palestinian in Jerusalem. There's a group called Canadians for CJP, Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East. Some of you probably know more about this than I do. Some of you maybe don't know anything about it. But there are other groups as well. The Friends or the Quakers are active on this issue. One of the things I'd like to see happen would be for these groups to work together more, to consult with each other, and to be very practical and realistic about what's achievable in Canada. And just an example of the kind of thing I think about is Canada gives $30 million a year in foreign aid to the Palestine Authority. So you might think Canada is contributing to help Palestinians $30 million a year. But virtually all that money is used for the security apparatus that keeps Abbas and the Palestine Authority in power. It supports the Palestine police, who suppress demonstrations and arrest other Palestinians. That's where Canadian foreign aid is applied in Palestine. So that's the kind of thing that I would love to see Canadians working on. And again, if I'm trying to think, what can I actually do? I can't influence the U.S. I'm not going to influence the evangelical Christians of that ilk. There are other evangelical Christians who are doing good things in the world. There's a lot that I feel like we can get upset about but not impact. And we should be able to impact what our own country is doing. And it takes a lot of organizing and a lot of work, and those organizations have to work with each other to do that. Also, you talked about what is called BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions, that we can make choices about what we participate in economically. We can get the organizations we work with to do that. And that, I think, feels very supportive to Palestinians to know that that's going on out here. And it has impact. Israel's working really hard to suppress BDS. And the United Church has taken a stand on it, the Presbyterian Church, all these churches I mentioned before have, labor unions have, municipalities have. That's another thing we can do. I'm trying to organize my own thoughts here a bit. Oh, here's the other thing I wanted to say from before. My experience last year of being in Bethlehem for 10 days and seeing what's going on in that city, and then being with this small community of other people who are Bedouin, herders, impressed upon me how much we can help people there, and they're just in their daily life. Just to support the struggles of daily life, of just getting kids up to go to school, or having adequate food, or having access to health care. There's so many things that I think I don't want to make Palestinians sound like kind of recipients of aid or just humanitarian support. But there's so many things like that are important. And I think, just for example, Robert selling Palestinian produce supports people there. So that is another thing that I would like to do more of, to directly help people on the ground with tangible, concrete things. There's something I organize. I don't know how my time is doing. Can somebody just give me a time check or time cue?
You have to finish up soon.
I'm sorry?
3 or 4 minutes.
3 or 4 minutes, okay. Okay. So I heard about a project based in California that buys small, handheld, solar-powered lights for children in Gaza, where they don't have electricity most hours of the day. What I hear is they have electricity 3 or 4 hours a day. I met a young man who told me he studied for high school and university by candlelight because they didn't have electricity. So there's a group in California that buys these little solar-powered handheld lamps and sends them to Gaza. They've sent tens of thousands of them. They have an arrangement where they are able to get them in. So it occurred to me, I want to support that. I want to help that. And I'm saying this just as an idea of something to do. I organized a Hanukkah party. And Hanukkah is about light, right? We light these candles on Hanukkah. We talk about light. So in Vancouver, in December, I organized a Hanukkah party. And I called it something like Light Up the Dark in Gaza Hanukkah Party, and asked everybody to donate $18, because that's a Jewish number. The numerical value of 18 is equal to the word for life. People like giving $18. Give $18. I said every lamp costs $25, and we ended up raising $3,000, which provided over 100 lamps I've never seen them, I never touched them, but I know there's like more than 100 little children in Gaza have this thing that if they leave it out in the sun during the day, then at night, if they have to go to the bathroom or they need to go outside or whatever, they're not stumbling around in the dark. And on one hand, it's like pitiful that we'd have to do that at all. I feel like I shouldn't even be talking about it. But on the other hand, they need it. They need it. Where are they going to get that? So I'm not saying do what I did, but try to think, what can we do to actually make a difference in people's life on just a day-to-day basis?
David, you want to mention Ibtisam's project?
Yeah, just one more project. There actually are hundreds of projects. So Gail just mentioned a woman named Ibtisam. She's from the same Bedouin community that I mentioned, but her family ended up outside of Jerusalem. They lived there until 1967 when Israel invaded and took it over and took their land from them. And she has for years organized an after-school program for kids, mostly girls, and she helps them with skills, she helps them with art and music and provides a really nice little space for them, but she doesn't really have a space for them. So she wants to build a building with electricity and running water, and she needs something pitiful like $30,000 to do that. She actually has permission from the Israelis to build it. It's a long story, but if you want to know more, you could ask me or ask Gail, and we could tell you about that. And there are hundreds and hundreds of projects in so many ways. And I'll mention one more thing. There's a new website, which is like a crowdfunding website created by Palestinians in Palestine. It's very well organized. It's called Build Palestine. And it has projects in Palestine that are vetted by a panel of Palestinians or business people and academics. And you can go there and you can look at different projects doing different things and just help them and support them. I'm sure there's so much more to talk about. It's endless. But I actually want to go back to this idea of we need the courage to speak out. It can be very intimidating, and you can get into fights. People can accuse you of all kinds of things, but also if you're looking for the truth, I actually think we do know the truth. I think we have the truth, and we need to bring it out into the world and share it with others more. So I'm going to stop there, but thank you.